Namaste, hello, and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav, and in this video, we'll be discussing selected topics from the Hindu and Indian Express for the date 18th of September. Now, in this video, we'll be discussing the following topics. Bamboo shoots can be among cheapest immunity boosters, a very good finding by experts. This basically tells that bamboo shoots have 17 amino acids, out of which 8 are the essential amino acids which our bodies cannot make, and bamboo shoots are a very good source of those amino acids. They also have a very high protein ratio, so they can be very helpful for boosting immunity, and they are very cheap, and development of bamboo shoot industry can also help in the development of the northeastern region of our country. 10 patrolling points in the eastern Ladakh blocked by Chinese. So in this, we'll just be discussing about the concept of patrolling points, that what are patrolling points. I will explain the patrolling points. I will also give you a demonstration of patrolling points. Then continuity in change. This article is basically about Mr. Suga, who has taken over as the PM of Japan. So what it means for India, would he be continuing the policies of Mr. Abe or would he be implementing some changes? Let us see. Then Paytm back on App Store after Google Wrap. So basically Paytm launched some new game on its app. It basically gave stickers to people on transaction and people could get cashbacks on those stickers. Now Google said that such a scheme basically violates its rules for gambling on the App Store, and Google removed Paytm from its App Store. There was a huge hue and cry, and Paytm responded by removing that feature from its app. Now it's back on the App Store. Another interesting point is that Paytm is the biggest competitor of Google Pay in India. So maybe that also prompted Google to temporarily ban Paytm. So we'll see the issue. Then WebHub to be held online from October 2. Now what is this WebHub and what is its importance? We'll be discussing. UPSC has a knack for asking such questions. So that is why I am going to discuss that. Then country of origin, onus is on importers. Now this is very important news because what happened, since we all know that we are going to, or we are in the process of banning Chinese products. Now India has an FTA with ASEAN. So what China was doing and unscrupulous traders in India were doing, that basically China is also having an FTA with ASEAN. So China would send its product to ASEAN country, and then in that country they would change the label on the product and then they would send it to India, so that they don't have to pay any duty. So this was basically swindling the government of India, because in effect it was failing the measures put in by government of India to ban Chinese products. So now government of India has come out with country of origin rules, which says that the importer has to make sure that the country of origin rules are strictly implemented so that there is no swindling of Indian authorities. Then China sends fighters towards Taiwan. Now China under Mr. Xi Jinping is acting erratically. China is picking up fights with anyone and everyone. So in that line, China is also picking up fights with Taiwan. Now Taiwan is getting increasingly close with the US, especially after the Hong Kong fiasco. Now this has rattled China. Now the backdrop of this was that Taiwan was hosting a US official, in fact a highest US ranking official in the past 4 decades, and that rattled China. And China responded in a manner that it best can, that is through intimidation. Then 1.3 billion people directly depend on Himalayan Hindu Kush ecosystem. Very, very important article. It tells us about the water scarcity that is looming over this region because of the retreat of glaciers in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. We'll also get to see what is the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Basically, this region spans over 8 countries. And it is the origin of 10 of the largest rivers in Asian continent. So this region has great importance for the well-being of people in this region, and any change in the ecosystem and ecology of this region would have drastic impact on the lives of people of this region in the coming times. So we'll discuss this article in detail. Then why MSP scare? Wheat farmers availing it double in 5 years, paddy up 70%. So basically, what we'll be discussing here is the concept of MSP. Why is there MSP? We have already discussed the 2 bills that are being brought by government of India, and that is leading to agitation by farmers, especially in Punjab and Haryana. We have discussed the salient features of the bill, and we have also discussed why farmers are protesting, and also why the states are objecting to these bills. Now, in this article, we'll be understanding the whole concept of MSP. What is MSP? Who recommends the MSP? What are the specifications that are taken into consideration while giving out the MSP? What is the importance of MSP to farmers? We'll be discussing that in detail. And then media should not target minorities. This is basically a case regarding a show called Halla Bol that was aired on the Sudarshan TV channel, and there were demands to ban it. First, there was a demand to ban the show even before it was aired on the TV, but the court refused to intervene because it said that pre-censorship is a very bad precedent in a democracy. But since 3 to 4 episodes of this serial have been aired, now Supreme Court has given a sound judgment and it has banned the airing of this serial, and it has also made some observations. So we'll look into that. So let's get started. Bamboo shoots can be among cheapest immunity boosters. Now very interesting news, and it has implications for our population. Let us see. They contain 17 amino acids, 8 of which are essential, says experts. So we'll understand what are amino acids, what are essential amino acids, why are amino acids important, what are bamboo shoots, what are the prospects of bamboos in India, and what is the global market for bamboos. So let us see what the article is saying. So what are amino acids? Often referred to as the building blocks of proteins. They are compounds that play many critical roles in your body. Speaking of roles, what roles do they play? They are needed for vital processes like building of proteins and synthesis of hormones and neurotransmitters. So it is important both for your physical and mental health. What are essential amino acids? Essential amino acids are those amino acids that your body cannot process itself, so they have to be taken from outside. So essential amino acids cannot be made by the body. As a result, they must come from outside or from food. Now what are bamboo shoots? Bamboo shoots are edible sprouts of perennial grass, that is bamboo. Bamboo is a grass. In fact, it is the tallest grass on the planet and are considered a nutraceutical. The protein content in fresh bamboo shoots can range between 1.49 to 4.04%. So a very protein rich source. Now the question arises that what is a nutraceutical? The term nutraceutical is used to describe medicinally and nutritionally functional foods. So what are nutraceuticals? Medicinally and nutritionally functional foods. Now what is the global market for bamboo shoots? It is about $1,700 million. So quite a big market, and bamboos are especially grown in the northeast region of our country. So exporting bamboo shoots can provide an economic fillip to the entire northeastern region. Now talking of bamboo in India, more than 3 million tons of bamboo shoots are consumed across earth annually, but the shoot production and consumption in India are confined mostly to the northeastern states. According to the National Bamboo Mission, India has the highest area under bamboo. So such questions can also come in your PT, that India has highest area under bamboo. And India has the second richest country in terms of biodiversity with 136 species of bamboo that are found in India. The annual production of bamboo in India is 14.6 million tons, and the bamboo rattan industry is worth 28,000 crore in 2017. So quite a big industry in India as well. So again, entrepreneurs can exploit this opportunity. This will help not only new entrepreneurs but also the development of northeastern region. China sends fighters towards Taiwan. So there's no stopping the Chinese madness. They're not just fighting India. I've told you earlier as well that along with India, they're also picking up fights with Japan, Russia, then in the South China Sea, and with Japan in East China Sea, and with US they are having a trade war. So China is fighting with anyone and everyone. Now they are trying to bully Taiwan as Taiwan is coming closer to US. So what really happened, that there was a visit by a US official. It was indeed the highest level US official visit to this island nation called Taiwan in the last 4 decades. So to intimidate the Taiwanese people, the Chinese sent their 18 planes, bombers and fighters that crossed the midline across the Taiwanese Strait. I'll just show you on map what is the Taiwan Strait and what is the midline. Now let's see what the Article is saying 18 warplanes crossed the midline of Taiwan Strait even as island was hosting top US official. Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, the most senior official to visit island in 4 decades. In some other video, we'll discuss the whole One China, Two System policy. We'll be discussing Hong Kong and Taiwan. We'll see the agreements that China signed and how China is violating all those agreements. Aggression on multiple fronts. China is now dealing with 4 or 5 fronts, from Ladakh to the South China Sea issue, East China Sea with Japan and Taiwan. There is also another Western front if we look at the internal problems in Xinjiang, especially the Uyghur problem, the Muslims that are being subjected to heavy atrocities by the communist state. Now let us just look at this Taiwan Strait. First of all, what is a strait? Strait is a narrow water body that connects 2 large water bodies. So in this case, the Taiwan Strait is connecting the East China Sea to the North China Sea, and it is lying in the South China Sea. So this is the middle line, that is a de facto border between China and Taiwan in terms of airspace. It is called an air defense zone. So Chinese air defense zone is still here and Taiwan is still here, but they cross this zone. So what is a strait? A narrow passage of water connecting 2 seas or 2 larger areas of water. Taiwan Strait is currently part of South China Sea and connects East China Sea to the North China Sea. Now Global Times, which is the official mouthpiece of the Communist Party and the Chinese government, wrote that, see how intimidating their language is. Yesterday also I told you about an article in Global Times when they said that China should be ready for war with its neighbors. Well, they were pointing fingers at India. Now they're trying to intimidate Taiwan as well. The drills were preparation for an attack on Taiwan should the need arise, and they enabled intelligence gathering about Taiwan's defense system. So the Chinese have really gone crazy under Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping, like I told you, is acting like a super villain from some Bond movie. Something really wrong with that man. The Customs Administration of Rules of Origin under Trade Agreements Rules 2020, or the CAROTAR 2020. Now this is about rules of origin. Now the backstory is that we are banning Chinese products. Now China was using a backdoor. How? Because India has signed FTA with ASEAN countries. ASEAN is a 10-member bloc of the Southeast Asian region, right? So India has an FTA with ASEAN. Now what China was doing? China was exporting its material to ASEAN because China also has an FTA with ASEAN. So China was exporting its goods to ASEAN countries, and there it was rebranding them and then sending them to India. So in effect, what these unscrupulous traders both in India and China were doing, they were basically making a fool out of the government of India. They were importing Chinese goods, but they were showing that the country of origin was not China, but indeed some country in the ASEAN region. Now what happens in a free trade area? As the name suggests, trade is free. That means the custom duties and the barriers that are put on trade are non-existent or very, very low. So whenever you are importing something from a free trade zone, then you have to give certificate to the customs agency and they give you sort of discount on the duties, right? Now new rules have come and it puts onus on the traders that they have to ensure that the country of origin, whatever they are selling, the country of origin is right in the sense that it is manufactured in the country from where it is being imported. And all the invoices that these importers and exporters would be generating, they would also mention the country of origin. So let us see what these rules are all about. Importers will have to do their due diligence to ensure that imported goods meet the prescribed rules of origin, provisions for availing concessional rate of customs duty under the free trade agreements. This follows completion of the 30-day period that was given to importers and other stakeholders to familiarize themselves with new provisions. So there was a sunset clause of 30 days that you take 30 days, that is a month, to familiarize yourself, and then these rules would be strictly implemented. Now India, ASEAN, FTA and China angle. ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, FTA allows imports of most items at nil or concessional basic customs duty from the 10 nation bloc. So there was also talk of India joining RCEP. So India did not join RCEP because signing the RCEP agreement would have been virtually like signing a free trade agreement with China, which would have been very, very dangerous for our domestic trade. Major imports to India come from 5 ASEAN countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore and Vietnam. The benefit of concessional customs duty rate applies only if an ASEAN member country is the country of origin of goods. So country of origin of goods, that means it should be manufactured originally in that country, not that they are importing goods from China and then they are rebranding them that made in Vietnam or made in Thailand. It should be made in Thailand or Vietnam only, not imported. What the new rules would do: they would support the importer to correctly ascertain the country of origin, help them properly claim the concessional duty, assist custom authorities in smooth clearance of legitimate imports under FTAs. Now, what is a free trade agreement? A brief introduction. It is a pact between 2 or more nations to reduce barriers to imports and exports among them. Goods and services can be bought and sold across international borders with little or no government tariffs, quotas, subsidies or prohibitions to inhibit their exchange. So basically it makes the trade between 2 nations or more very open and fluid. Now India's FTAs. India has signed several FTAs including Japan, South Korea and ASEAN members, but India will not be joining RCEP anytime soon till the time our concerns, especially vis-a-vis China, are addressed properly. 10 patrolling points in eastern Ladakh blocked by Chinese. So we have been discussing patrolling points throughout our videos. So today we will get to know what are patrolling points. And apart from that, nothing new, but we'll just understand what is the concept of patrolling points. This picture was also there in yesterday's video. So this is here just to give you an idea about patrolling points. So what are patrolling points? They are the endpoints along the undefined LAC up to which Indian troops patrol after starting from their base camps. So that is the area till which they can go. So basically there are almost 65, more than 65 patrolling points. And we also know some of them also lie along the Pangong Tso Lake. We have discussed the fingers, finger 1 to 8 and the gray area between fingers 4 to 8. In all, there are more than 65 patrolling points from the base of Karakoram to Chumar. I've shown you all of these on maps. You can go to previous video and refer to the maps. Since April, Indian troops have been denied access to patrol points number 9, 10, 11, 12, 12A, 13, 14, 15, 17, 17A. So yesterday I showed you that this is in the Depsang region, 10, 11, 12, 13. This is the crucial Y junction or bottleneck. It is also called the Burt's point, and here the PLA is sitting and it is blocking our access to all of these patrol points. The blocked patrol points span from Depsang Plains in the north to Pangong Tso Lake in the south. Pangong Tso fingers 4 to 8, we are not able to patrol these points. So this was about the patrolling points. You just need to know the concept of patrolling points. Again, you can see the map, Daulat Beg Oldi. So from Karakoram, here is Karakoram, and Chumar, there are almost more than 65 patrolling points, right? And we've been seeing them again and again. These things, Daulat Beg Oldi, highest airstrip India can land, C-130, J Hercules. We have also sent a whole battalion of T-90 tanks here with 4,000 troops that are there to safeguard our frontiers. Konka Pass, Hot Springs, Pangong Tso, Chushul, Sangur Gap. These are all the hot points where there is standoff, and these are also strategically important areas. Media should not target minorities, Supreme Court. So there was a show on a channel called Sudarshan TV called Halla Bol, and it showed the minority community, the Muslim community, in a very negative light. It basically made some comments in regards to their entry into the civil services, and it said that it is a conspiracy by these minorities to infiltrate the civil services. And they also mentioned the Zakat Foundation, which has links to Zakir Naik and other extremist organizations. So in light of this, there were appeals in the court to ban this show. Before the first episode, there was an appeal, but the court refused to ban the show or stop its telecast because it said that the concept of pre-censorship, that is censoring something before releasing or before publishing, is a very dangerous precedent in a democracy. Now that 3 or 4 episodes had run, then again there was appeal in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said that okay, this show is not right, so it should be banned. So in that context, the Supreme Court made a statement that media should not target minorities. A message needs to go out to the media that it cannot make a religious minority the target of its attacks. The observation was made by the court about the show Halla Bol, which claimed that members of Muslim community are attempting to infiltrate the civil services. So the court also made the observation that every group wants to have representation in the civil services. So there's nothing wrong that if Muslims also want representation in the civil services. It also raises questions about several organizations such as Zakat Foundation, which are run by Muslim community members. The show questions their funding and even accuses them of facilitating the infiltration of people with terror links into the Union Public Service Commission. So this is all about this article. Paytm back on App Store after Google Wrap. So basically Google removed this Paytm app from its Play Store because it said that Paytm is engaging in gambling, which is highly against the rules of Play Store. Now it is another fact or a very interesting point that Paytm is the biggest competitor of Google Pay or GPay. So Paytm was banned for some time, then Paytm made some changes. There was hue and cry on Twitter and everywhere, and now Paytm is back. So let's see what the article is saying. Google restored the listing of Paytm on its application store. Why was Paytm removed from Google Play Store? Google said it pulled down the popular financial services platform for violating its policies relating to gambling. Now this was the platform, the first games esports that Paytm was running. So what did Paytm do? Paytm had recently introduced the Paytm Cricket League on its consumer app, where users receive player stickers after each transaction, collect them and receive Paytm cash back. It was because of this feature that Google had removed the application from its Play Store. Now what was Paytm's response? Paytm, which competes with Google's digital payments application GPay in India, said all activities on Paytm are completely lawful. It assured users that their account balance was safe. It has temporarily removed the cashback component to meet the Play Store policy rules. So, a controversy avoided and Paytm is back. Continuity in change. So this article is about the new Japanese PM and what it means for India. So the new Japanese PM is Yoshihide Suga. So now India is hoping that Japan under Mr. Suga will not steer away from the course set by Abe, because Mr. Modi and Abe had a very good personal relationship. Even Mr. Abe shared a good relationship with Manmohan Singh, and under Mr. Abe, India and Japan had grown very close, especially in terms of economy. So now, because unfortunately Mr. Abe had to resign because of his health reasons, a new person is in office. Now India hopes that the policies set in motion by Mr. Abe will not be affected and India and Japan would continue to work closely with each other. Mr. Suga promises continuity rather than change as he takes the reins. He has been the chief cabinet secretary since 2012 as well as the top spokesperson and a key implementer of Mr. Abe's policies. In fact, he is very close to Mr. Abe, and that is one of the reasons that he was elevated to the post of Prime Minister of Japan. The goal is to continue with Mr. Abe's policies and complete his goals, particularly the tasks of reviving the economy and controlling the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, as Mr. Suga takes over, he is facing many challenges. What are those challenges? Let us look at them. He has taken charge at a crucial moment in a rapidly changing world. There is a need to steer through the outcome of US elections in November. Then there's the problem of China's growing aggressiveness and worldwide economic downturn. A main challenge will be to ensure the success of Tokyo Olympics, now rescheduled for July 2021 due to the pandemic. Now what it means for India. Mr. Abe's exit is a loss given his game-changing moves on India-Japan ties. Now, what all did he do? He upgraded the relationship to a special strategic and global partnership. He instituted the annual Prime Ministerial Summits from 2006. He spearheaded both versions of the quadrilateral with the US and Australia. So, Japan is very instrumental in bringing India and the Quad together. He personally moved the India-Japan Civil Nuclear Partnership through the Diet, that is the Parliament of Japan, Japan's first with a non-NPT country. Now, what is NPT? It is Non-Proliferation Treaty. What it is, what it means for India, why does India not sign NPT? We'll be discussing in detail when we will discuss about nuclear disarmament. And one of his last official acts was signing the acquisition and cross-servicing agreement, a significant step in defense cooperation. So we have discussed this in the previous video, that this would enable the armies of the both countries to basically use each other's facility and help each other in defined areas. So let's hope that under Mr. Suga, the Indian-Japanese partnership continues to grow and all the projects that were put in place during the tenure of Mr. Abe see their logical conclusion. Vaibhav to be held online from October 2. So what is Vaibhav? Now UPSC has a nag of asking such things, so that is why I have covered this. What is Vaibhav? The Vaishvik Bharatiya Vigyanik Summit, or the Vaibhav. Now basically what it is, that they are calling the NRI scientists and they are going to discuss important issues with them, and then they'll come up with a blueprint as to how India should proceed with its development of science and technology and also its overall development, and that will set a tone for the future. So let us see. The Department of Science and Technology. So who is conducting? Department of Science and Technology and DRDO will be organizing a month-long session of webinars and online discussions involving non-resident Indian scientists, or the NRIs, being organized to help develop a comprehensive roadmap to leverage the expertise and knowledge of global Indian researchers for solving emerging challenges. Like in yesterday's video, we discussed that how India is lagging in terms of new technology in green energy. Such NRI scientists could help India in accessing and developing such technologies. By bringing the Indian overseas and resident academicians, scientists together, a structure of association will be evolved. The end product will be a roadmap and broad direction on the kind of research that will benefit India in the future. Key areas of discussion will include quantum technologies, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now this is very important, quantum technologies, artificial intelligence and machine learning, because I have told you already that China has made giant gains in these fields, especially artificial intelligence and machine learning. And they have evolved very sophisticated AI softwares. And even in the hybrid war news, I told you how they are tracking everything of a person using this artificial intelligence. So India also needs to up its game to counter China. Electronics and semiconductor technologies, communication technologies, photonics, computational and data sciences, and aerospace technologies, among others. So these are the main areas of focus, and this is all about Vaibhav. Why MSP scare? Wheat farmers availing it double in 5 years, paddy up to 70%. So basically this is about MSP, and this is related to the two new bills that have come, which are related to the farm sector. In yesterday's video, we have discussed those two new bills and their salient features, the advantages that the government of India is saying. Then we also discussed why the farmers are objecting and why the states are objecting. Farmers fear that there might be dilution of MSP, and they also fear that they won't be able to compete with corporates once contract farming is formalized. Now the states say that agriculture is a state subject, and making laws on agriculture is like encroaching on the jurisdiction of the states. And second, they say that as the bills enable the sale outside the APMC mandated mandis, then states won't be able to collect taxes for such sales, and that would deprive them of revenue. Now in this article, nothing more. It is just saying that in the past 5 years, the farmers who are availing wheat has gone up by twice, and the paddy has gone up by 70%. So we'll be discussing the concept of MSP. Now what is MSP? See what happens. A farmer grows his crop and then he has to sell that crop. Now what used to happen earlier, you must have seen in old movies, there used to be a Thakur in a village. Now I'm not trying to offend anyone, just giving an example. So please don't take it seriously. So there used to be a Thakur and the farmer would sell his crop to the Thakur, not at the cost at which farmer wanted to sell, but at the cost at which Thakur wanted to buy. And go back a bit, then the British East India Company, it did exactly the same. Especially when you'll read history, you'll get to know about indigo cultivation, and then you'll get to know about indigo revolts, and also related to indigo is the rise of Mahatma Gandhi. So you'll be studying all that in detail. So one of the things in indigo cultivation was that it was the British who dictated at what price would they be buying the crop, and it was independent of the fact that the input cost that the farmers was incurring, the British were least bothered about it. Same is the story of the village Thakur, the quintessential evil man of early Hindi movies who would exploit the farmers and buy crops at rock bottom prices. Now similar situations happen in real life as well, because the farmers are poor, they don't have bargaining power, so they were left to the vagaries of the market, and these buyers would be powerful people, so they would dictate the prices at which they would buy from the farmers. So many farmers would get way less than what they had incurred in growing those crops. So to counter such problems, the government came up with a program called MSP, which says minimum support price. Now it says that government will announce MSP before the sowing season for certain crops, and based on that, farmers would be growing crops. Now once the crop has grown and harvested, farmers have a choice. Either they can sell to the government at MSP, or dealers in market can buy from the farmers. Now the dealers would have to pay greater than MSP, then only farmers would be willing to sell to the dealers, or else why would they sell to the dealers? So this MSP basically acts as a benchmark price over and above which the dealers buy from farmers. Now this MSP is announced by central government. Now there's another level that states also issue their own MSP, which is over and above the MSP by central government. So what happens that in principle farmer gains, because for example center issued an MSP of 100 rupees per kg for wheat, state said that 120 kg, then a dealer would say that dear farmer, come to me and sell it to me for 130 rupees. So the farmer is gaining something. So this is the whole concept behind MSP. Now there might also be a situation that when the government announced the MSP, the economy was doing well, but within a year or 3-4 months, the economy went down. Now the dealers are not ready to buy from the farmers. So at least farmers have a place in form of government of India or state governments where they can sell their crops at a minimum price. So this is the concept of MSP. Now let us dig into it. MSP is a form of market intervention by Government of India to ensure agricultural producers against any sharp fall in farm prices. In theory, an MSP is the minimum price set by the Government of India at which farmers can expect to sell their produce for the season. When market prices fall below the announced MSPs, procurement agencies step in to procure the crop and support the prices. So this is the support component, and that is the minimum component. That is why it is called minimum support price. Now who announces the MSP and when? The Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs of Government of India at the beginning of the sowing season for certain crops on the basis of the recommendation of Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, CACP. So the Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs on the recommendations of CACP announces MSP. Now what are the factors that are taken into consideration for fixing MSP? Demand and supply, which is the fundamental rule of economy, cost of production, price trends in the market, both domestic and international, intercrop price parity. There should also be intercrop price parity. It should not be that, for example, for wheat MSP was 100 and for rice MSP was 50. So more and more farmers would be growing wheat, and then that would lead to scarcity of rice in the market. So there has to be a parity between different crops as well, because basically MSP sets the trend for the agricultural sowing. So they have to be very, very careful about announcing the MSPs. Terms of trade between agriculture and non-agriculture. A minimum of 50% as the margin over costs of production. This was basically recommended by Rangarajan committee, and after that they said that whatever the cost of production, for example, you are a farmer and you are incurring a cost of rupees 100 per kg in growing wheat. So MSP would be rupees 150 or above. Likely implications of MSPs on consumer of that product. For example, now you want to do good for the farmer, so you raise the price of MSP for wheat to 200 rupees per kg. Now, if at the source it is 200 rupees per kg, it might happen that you as a consumer are buying wheat at rupees 300 or 250 or 350 rupees per kg. Now the government has to balance between the interest of the Kisan and the interest of the common man. And in fact, at the end of the day, Kisan is also a consumer. We discussed 2 or 3 videos back on the basis of NSO surveys that small and marginal farmers are net consumers, not net producers. So basically they grow crops, but in the end they are net consumers. That is, they buy more than they produce. So the prices have to be set at a level that the farmers also earn, and also the Aam Aadmi or the common man also is able to afford those food grains. How many crops are covered under MSP? Government announces MSP for 22 mandated crops and fair and remunerative price for sugarcane. The mandated crops are 14 crops of the Kharif season, 6 for the Rabi crops and 2 other commercial crops. In addition, MSPs of Toria and dehusked coconut are fixed on the basis of MSPs of rapeseed and mustard and copra respectively. So this is what the MSP covers. 22 mandated crop plus sugarcane plus Toria and dehusked coconut. So that is why at some places you will find they're writing 25 crops. But if you go to Government of India site, they are saying 22 mandated crops. This is the language that Government of India website uses. So that is why I'm telling you like this. So this is all about the MSP concept, right? Now this MSP concept is evergreen because you will be using it over and over again, not just for current affairs, but it is also a part of your static part of the syllabus. So you must understand this concept in depth. 1.3 billion people directly depend on Himalayan Hindu Kush ecosystem. Now a very important and very, very interesting article. It is basically telling us that because of the global warming, there is melting of the glaciers in the Hindu Kush and Himalayan region. And because of this glacial retreat, the springs and water sources in the region are depleting, and within 50 to 100 years, there would be severe water problems in this region. So let us see what this article is saying. This article is very, very important. It not only has implications for your examination, but also for your life as well. So let us see what this article is all about. And also within this article, we'll also get to know about the Himalayan Hindu Kush region. Very, very important region. It is basically home to 10 major rivers of the world, and a large chunk of population of the world depend on these rivers. And its ecology is very, very frail, and it is being destroyed by global warming. So let us get into the article. Glacier retreat in Himalayas to cause water crisis. Study by Observer Research Foundation. Now studies by ISRO show that approximately 75% of the Himalayan glaciers are retreating at an alarming rate. So this is not good at all. The retreat of glaciers in the Himalayan Hindu Kush region is now affecting the surface water and groundwater availability in the region and has adversely affected springs, a lifeline for the population in hill areas. If you are from any hilly area, unfortunately, I don't know about hilly areas of South India, but from North India, I can tell you that you really don't have ready resources of water. Earlier, women had to walk long distances to get water, and the hilly terrain makes it all the more difficult. Now that the glaciers are retreating and the springs are getting depleted, the water problem will be very, very severe. As a matter of fact, in popular hill stations like Nainital, Shimla, Mussoorie, Manali, there is already a severe water shortage which is being faced by the locals of those areas. These retreats will increase the variability of water flows to downstream areas and endanger the sustainability of water use in Earth's most crowded basins, especially the Ganga, the Indus, and the Brahmaputra, the three major river systems of India. All of these three would be adversely affected, and basically, this report is saying the most adversely affected would be Ganga, and Ganga river basin is the home to the heaviest population density in the world. So see what kind of an impact would that have on the lives of people in the Indian subcontinent. So this news is very, very important. Urgent steps need to be taken to counter this problem. These retreats will increase the variability of water flows to downstream areas and endanger the sustainability of water use in the Earth's most crowded basins. Receding glaciers would also have an impact on the rates of groundwater recharge in some areas. Unless a coherent nationwide policy is developed for springs and Himalayan groundwater, villages and towns in the region will face a severe water crisis in coming decades. Very alarming. The decline in groundwater due to anticipated decline in glacial meltwater is likely to affect the Ganges basin the most. And just now I told you that the Ganges basin is one of the most highly densely populated regions of the world. So you can imagine the kind of problem this would bring. Glacial decline is closely related to climate change. Now, what would be the impact on India? There are 5 million springs in the Himalayas and they are showing a decline because of overuse by increasing population, but also because of retreating glaciers and depleting groundwater levels. So see, there's a double whammy. If I say in terms of demand and supply, so the demand is increasing in terms of overuse, but the supply is shrinking because of the retreating glaciers and depleting groundwater levels. So demand is much more than supply, and in the end it would lead to a disaster. The populations that live in the upper and middle Himalayas, in villages and even towns, are dependent on spring water. For the upper Indus basin, glacial melt may contribute up to 41% of the total runoff, 13% in the upper Ganga basin and 16% in the upper Brahmaputra basin. Now basically runoff is that when a water falls on the surface and it is not absorbed by surface, it runs off the surface, and that is what is runoff. While initially the retreating glaciers will not have a direct impact on water flow in rivers, and that is why we are so complacent about it. And suddenly one day we will realize its impact. It's not that it would happen all of a sudden, but the impact would start showing all of a sudden. All these changes are taking place as we speak, but nobody is doing anything solid or substantial to solve this problem. Except in the Indus, where 26% flow is from glacier melt, this is unlikely to change soon. So out of Ganga, Brahmaputra and Indus, the three major river systems of North India, only Indus is likely to survive much longer than Ganga and Brahmaputra. Climate warming is affecting hydrological regimes in the Hindu Kush region because of factors like changes in seasonal extremes, increased evapotranspiration, and changes in glacier volume. The study forecasts that in all three basins, there would be a decrease in snow and a rise in glacial melt by the middle of the century. So that day is not far ahead. Initially, there will be an increased amount of melt water available. So initially people would be happy that rivers are flowing beyond their capacity. In fact, even that would bring its own set of problems like floods and urban floods. But initially we'd see a surge in water supply in rivers, and then those rivers would start shrinking or going dry. But this quantity will decline abruptly as the glacial storage is reduced. Now about the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. The Hindu Kush region extends across 3,500 kilometers over 8 countries: Afghanistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal and Pakistan. And see, among these 8, India and China among the top 5 global emitters of greenhouse gas. Yesterday we did a very good article about greenhouse gases and the double standards of West, and I think in video 4 or 5 we discussed about Himalayan region as well, the problems faced by the people of Himalayan region. So you can go back and refer to those videos as well. It has the biggest reserves of water in the form of ice and snow outside the polar regions. Very important. Such questions can also come in your multiple choice PT questions. And is the source of 10 of the largest rivers in Asia. I already told you in the introduction. About 1.3 billion people directly depend on the Hindu Kush ecosystems, including for irrigation, power, and drinking water. Now let us see the map of this Hindu Kush Himalayan region and the rivers that are flowing and originating in that region. So basically this region in green is the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Basically Hindu Kush mountains, there are also other mountain ranges, and then these are Himalayas. See the syntactial turn, and they are getting into Burma, then a branch here and other branches, right? So there are Himalayas, Trans-Himalayas. The Hindu Kush are under the Trans-Himalayan ranges. Now look at the major rivers. Indus, Ganga, Brahmaputra, Amu Darya, Tarim, Yellow River in China, Yangtze River. Now these rivers are also associated with old civilizations. For example, Indus River, Ganga River, Brahmaputra, Yangtze, Yellow, then Mekong River, Salabin River, Irrawaddy River. These are big rivers that are directly dependent on the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And see the amount of population in this region. In fact, just India and China are two of the most populous countries in the world, number 1 and number 2. So imagine the kind of human disaster we are looking at in future if this continues. And maybe in future, the third world war, God forbid, would be for water only. So let us hope that our governments wake up to this challenge and do something about it urgently so that the future is not so bleak for the coming generations. So that is all for this video, folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel if you like our videos and press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new video that we post. Also, if you like our video, press the like button. And please do connect with us on our Instagram page, UPSC for Everyone. See you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe, and have a great day. Namaste and Jai Hind.